Why, yes, Alfredo. I do think that hat suits you very much. Actually, yeah. Looks great. Oh, hi there. I'm Brendan Petersen, the founder of DARKSLIDE Pictures and the director of Paper Wasps. Welcome to number 11 of the Appalling Productions Mondays series. This episode is entitled 7 More Extremely Disturbing Films. Remember that this isn't supposed to be a definitive list of the most disturbing films ever. It's more just information awareness and trying to kind of build a community around weird, dark, and experimental film in general. Okay, so let's get started. Cannibal Holocaust is a 1980 cannibal exploitation film by Ruggero Deodato. The film imagines that during a rescue mission in the Amazon, a fictional professor stumbles across lost film from a missing documentary crew. The bulk of the film itself is supposed to represent this footage. Let's just say that the crew didn't fare off too well. The strong point of this movie, to me, is the gore effects, which were so realistic that legend has it that the production team had to show authorities the prosthetics to prove that they weren't real. One of the main complaints about this movie, and rightly so, is its depiction of animal cruelty. It has footage of animals being butchered, which to me is the most disturbing part of the film, and also shows an unethical side of the film which probably would make many viewers uncomfortable. These scenes in particular have really kept me from becoming a fan of the film myself, but it's hard to ignore the film when it comes to film history and the history of these kinds of cannibal exploitation films seen in that era. Men Behind the Sun is a 1988 historical horror film by T.F. Miao. It depicts the atrocities committed by Japanese Unit 731, which used secret biological weapons to experiment on the prisoners that they captured during World War II. One of the most criticized aspects that the director faced was the choice to make it more of an exploitation film, which many say negates any educational value associated with the real-world events tied to the film. Another very controversial aspect is the inclusion of actual autopsy footage of a young boy and a scene where a live cat appears to be thrown into a room and eaten alive by hundreds of rats. Later in the movie, a scene shows rats being set on fire. This level of animal cruelty and real-world gore is disturbing in itself in an equally unethical way as Cannibal Holocaust. Personally, I prefer my exploitation films to be made without causing intentional harm to living beings in the process, or exploiting the actual death of a young boy like that. Which is why this is another one I could find myself not being too big a fan of. But it may be an important milestone for this kind of historical horror at the time. Philosophy of a Knife is a 2008 horror film by Andrey Iskanov. It mixes archival footage, interviews, and extremely graphic reenactments of experiments. Like the previous film, Men Behind the Sun, this film also tries to depict the atrocities committed by Japanese Unit 731. It has been criticized for largely focusing on the gore and treating the complex subject matter of the psychology behind such atrocities more in the back burner. The film is shot in color for the interviews and black and white for the reenactments, which helps bring the footage back to the time and seems to help mold it together with the archival footage in a more coherent way. It's quite long and a bit meandering, but if you're a total gorehound, it might be worth your time checking out. L'Intérieur, known as Inside in English, is a 2007 home invasion horror film by Julien Maury and Alexandre Bustillo. It's part of what's called the new wave of French horror. The plot of the film centers around a young pregnant woman who is attacked inside her own home by a mysterious stranger who seeks to take her unborn baby. There's an awful Hollywood remake which isn't worth your time, so when seeking this one out, make sure it's the original from 2007. Without giving too much away, it's a different kind of take on a revenge flick. The idea of the directors was to take the typical home invader in these kinds of movies, which is typically a male, and make it a female instead. And then through that find a strong motivation for why a woman would attack another woman in such a way. The Act of Seeing with One's Own Eyes is a 1971 experimental film by Stan Brakhage. The film documents the highly graphic autopsy procedures used by forensic pathologists, such as the removal of organs and the embalming process. Like most of Brakhage's films, it is completely devoid of sound. In contrast to an earlier film in this list which also features a real autopsy, the philosophy behind this film is radically different, as is the approach to the subject matter. By employing his signature untutored eye, Brakhage explores the aspects of what these pathologists perform in a poetic way. He creates his own visual language with them. The gore details of the procedures then become something more, and they become sort of an aesthetic representation of light as it refracts and reflects and sheens on the fluids and bits of skin, as they seem to dance and eventually form a sort of overall beauty. Many exploitation films covering the same sort of subject matter where they use actual autopsy footage don't really seem to have the same approach. The Untold Story is a 1993 Hong Kong crime thriller directed by Herman. The film is based on the 8 Immortals restaurant murder that took place in 1985. Although the cannibalism aspects were never proven in real life. Due to its explicit and disturbing depictions of sex and violence, it was awarded the Category 3 rating, which is the Hong Kong equivalent to an X rating, meaning only persons 18 and older can watch it. Anthony Wong, who stars in the film, won Best Actor at the 13th Hong Kong Film Awards for his convincing and disturbing performance in the film. It's one of those films where the main character is such a horrible person that it's hard to watch. It's not a happy film in any sense, and it has to be one of the most bleak endings I've ever seen. Mean-spirited, yet well-made is how I would describe it. Considering what and who the film is ultimately about, I don't think that any of that takes away from its strength. Terrifying Girls High School, Lynch Law Classroom is a 1973 Japanese film by Norifumi Suzuki. It's part of the Toys' pinky violence style of pink film. This film is an odd one to add on this list because it's not disturbing for typical reasons. The reason it's on this list is due to its high level of perversion in its storytelling, which to some viewers might find it quite disturbing, honestly. Some of the perversion is so over the top, in fact, that it comes across as more of a satire. One scene in particular having a man surrounded by what are supposed to be high school girls that are clearly actresses much older, shouting about how he wanted to sleep with a group of high school girls for a long time or something like that. And meanwhile, people are listening in on him with a hidden microphone and are obviously shocked at what he's saying. The whole thing comes across as over the top, and you have to ask yourself, what am I even watching? Hey, thanks for watching Appalling Productions Mondays, episode number 11. In case you notice, when I make these lists, I don't actually show any footage or images from the films themselves, but I show you the year and information about the film enough to find it yourself, or find your own copy, or decide for yourself from the information I provide whether or not you want to seek it out to watch it. And the reason I do this is that's just kind of my own style, and I like to use mostly original footage that I take myself to make these videos, or in this case, some cool stock footage I found because I thought it kind of suited the tone of this one. So once again, thanks for watching and tune in for next week. Yeah, that's about it. Subscribe to the channel if you liked it too. Music by Cool Mud. I'm not